Alright, welcome back. Or, I don't know. Whatever, Silent Hill, here we go. We'll be doing the original since it's way more hilarious, and it's the first one I could find when searching for Silent Hill 1. Throughout this sort of analysis situation, I'll be going over dialogue and some gameplay mechanics and methods, or, just going off about pretty much anything that catches my attention. Let's jump into it. I'm going off of a walkthrough, so I do want you to bear in mind if something did get cut out and I don't know about it, it's because I wasn't about to pay money for a game I can't play anyway. Because I don't have a PlayStation nor an Xbox. So again, empathize with me here. Now, right off the bat, the screen gets thrown into the most horrifying graphics I've ever seen in my life. And that's coming from someone who watched Bijou Mike play multiple Baldi mods, including Raldi's Crack House. This animation does quite look broken. It adds to the horror element, so, So right now it looks like they got into a car accident and landed themselves in Silent Hill because of this car accident. This reminds me of the Twilight Zone, where you don't have to do anything in particular to end up stuck in a realm like that. Sometimes there is a reason, but in the majority of the cases they make, you'd probably be thinking they're really not that bad, and you're more likely to end up in the Twilight Zone than these people are. Silent Hill seems like some kind of forsaken realm in between life and death and limbo. You know you're screwed when you're stuck in between life, death, and limbo. The noise in this game is also so strange. It's so loud when he sits up. It sounds like leather pants stretching, but really loudly. Obviously, the first notable thing in this first scene is the thick fog. Now, apparently he was driving with someone named Cheryl, who is now missing. I say apparently because Silent Hill is considered somewhat of a psychological horror game, which means this could be mental shit, where he wasn't actually driving with someone and he was imagining her this entire time because he killed her and he now has father's guilt. Also, this character sprite reminds me of Fierce to Fathom. Oh, the memories. Interesting enough, at the beginning of the game there is no voice acting. He also realizes he's alone. Should I note out of context information, or is it confusing for you guys? You might be too young and too small to let me know now, but one day you'll be big enough to talk back to me, like a real teenager should. Until then, I'll keep confusing you with unnecessary information. So, he smashed into a fence. Yeah, no wonder the town cursed you. I don't know what kind of maniac this is. We haven't really been introduced to him, so we don't even know his name yet. We don't know his daughter, we don't know if he killed her, but I have a feeling that this guy wouldn't just drive directly into a fence, and the town might have something to do with that. So, is it a town or a hill? Or is it both? Is it Silent Town Hill? Now that would be weird. This doesn't matter. Point is, this man, I really genuinely don't know his name yet. We haven't been properly introduced yet. He says, I pray she's safe. You see that, guys? He's preying on Cheryl's safety, like predators do. Or murderers, perhaps. I'm not letting loose of that theory till he proves me wrong. I wonder who made that mistake. All those millions of copies sold just to have this annoying typo exist in the context of Silent Hill's original first game. How do you take this franchise seriously? I do have to add as well, I'm kind of bothered that whenever this man walks, it sounds like he's walking on the pavement. I wish I had the sound of him walking on snow whenever he's on the snow. But, I mean, what do you expect from a game that doesn't even know how to spell pray? Eventually, after traveling for a while, this strange man, whom we have yet to be introduced to, hears footsteps. How he heard those through his loud click-clacking on the pavement and possibly the snow is a mystery we can add on top of the to-come strange ongoings of Silent Hill. He ends up encountering this shadow around the corner, whom is apparently Cheryl. I won't lie, I'm surprised Cheryl's a little girl. Just curious, what sort of daddy-daughter road trips doesn't involve the mother? I mean, probably the majority of them. I don't know, I'm not a daddy's girl, I wouldn't know. Oh well, unless much like the movie, he was trying to find Silent Hill because she kept dreaming about it. But then again, that was a mother. Is the mother dead, or is this game a lot like Resident Evil, where the movie is at least 10 times better than the game? Also, the game suddenly has voice acting. And don't tell me it was his inner dialogue, because Resident Evil was smart enough to voice record their inner dialogue, like when interacting with objects. So this stranger encounters this corpse lying on the floor. He's wondering what it is, and I don't know about you, but that kind of looks like a cow to me. The ribs are really big, and not to mention the organs squashed out from the bones. Looks like the kind of thing you'd find hanging in your local butchery. That is, if you have a local butchery. One thing I do want to add that bothers me about this scene is the fact that the walking sound effects change when he's walking on this corpse. which is a three-step journey, mind you, but they couldn't use this same sound for when he's walking on snow. I mean, it literally sounds the same. I wouldn't even have noticed it. That's bothersome, you know? Coming from these really old games, while he's walking down this alley, these camera angles make me drunk. From the back of his head, there's an alleyway angle that sits sideways and on top of his head. The camera quite literally starts at his feet from the second angle and immediately just pushes you up to the ceiling where you're staring down at his head, and then continues to throw the camera angle around the alley. I have that sort of viewpoint because the camera shifts out from your view, taking the only control you have over this world away. Well, not the only control, but who wants to control the... Wait, you don't control the camera angles. Oh no, wait, you do, in first person and in third person. Which is exactly what bothered me about Resident Evil's original game. The one thing I can say about those camera angles is that at least the camera stood still. Here, the camera keeps moving while the character is running in a specific direction. And one thing that Super Rose said that really made me hate that angle thing that they do is that he said the controls shift out of place, immediately throwing you the opposite direction depending on which angle the next shot is facing. So while you're running for your life, you enter a new camera angle, you accidentally end up running right into the enemy and back into another angle that sends you running the right direction but then back in the wrong direction. I don't know what I'm complaining about because it's not like I'm the one playing the game, and this game is from 1990 something? Anyway, after our travel experience, the protagonist enters a dark area, quite literally dark. He has to whip out his lighter. One of the things I do find really weird about this character, he never bothered to knock on anybody's doors to see if anybody could help him. He literally crashed in a fence, climbed out as if it was just a little scrape, and started running around with some sort of prediction that nobody was around. I think he's been sniffing something, honestly. My theory is that he might be suffering a concussion, or he might be suffering with some sort of drug use problem. A concussion that causes him to solely focus on finding Cheryl, because he is so oblivious of human existence, and he only has this one task in front of him to the point where he's not even thinking of anything else that might be of more use to him than blindly wandering around a foreign back alley. He does know that gangs exist, right? I mean, not in Silent Hill, but gangs in general. He continues his journey forward in this dark alley with a lighter, and yes, it is necessary that I explain what he does every step of the way so you understand what's going on. So the odd swinging camera angles continues until he reaches a wheelchair. I don't know if this wheelchair has any significance because in Resident Evil you also get these useless things you can interact with that don't really do anything. But still, a wheelchair is expensive. Can you imagine ditching it in a back alley? Also, think of the significance of this wheelchair being here, because usually a disabled person or an injured individual who has trouble walking would be sitting in a wheelchair. In other words, whoever was sitting in this wheelchair suddenly stopped feeling sick and got up, like a miracle, but a really threatening one, so it's not really a miracle. Unless whoever was sitting there got jumped by something after whoever was pushing that wheelchair parked them there. That's very confusing. And probably doesn't matter, but hey, the stranger agrees that it's strange. Now, after he passes the wheelchair, as if that wasn't strange enough, he comes across a stretcher that's resting a half-limbed body with sheets drawn over it. I say half-limbed because, this corpse looks brutalized. I also want to specify that in the beginning when he saw those innards lying on the floor, he was so horrified by it that he quite literally used Jesus' name in vain, but for some reason this human carcass resting on a stretcher with several limbs missing is such a, huh? What's this? As if a dead animal is more horrifying than a desecrated corpse. I bet he's vegan. You know how heartless they are. Down the alley of blood and fences. Seriously, what kind of architectural structure builds a fence like this? So in case you couldn't tell by now, this man is completely unfazed by the vivid physical manifestation of a corpse wrapped in barbed wire. His line is, and I quote, in front of a literal corpse, "What is this?" Yeah, in case you can't tell either, it looks like a humble sacrifice the local cult made. Oh, how Lord Sadler could have used loyal servants such as these. But based on what I know about Silent Hill, chances are that this thing isn't even human, so I guess that could help you sleep at night. Afterwards, he gets ambushed by a bunch of mole creatures. I call them mole people, or mole creatures or whatever, because they do kind of walk like humans. Not that they look like humans. Hey look, he can actually make a facial expression despite these bad graphics. I do have to admit though, considering when this came out, if I were in that decade, my socks would have probably been blown off by these amazing animating talents of a 3D video game. So we meet this police officer. I don't know about you guys, but she looks kind of familiar. Also, doesn't she kind of remind you of Sherry Birkins? Also, we should start a pixie cut club for any and every female character in a video game that has a pixie cut. We can call it the Pixie Cut Cult Club. We'll then later decide what our brains are gonna do with this information afterwards, not that it can really do anything with it. This scene is so weird because this man makes this assumption that he was dreaming the whole thing, but the woman who found him, he never bothers to ask her, "Hey lady, what happened to me?" I'm starting to doubt the concussion theory and encourage the drug theory that he sniffed a bunch of crack after killing his daughter to forget about the guilt. After she asks him how he feels, how does this description sound to you guys? Like I've been run over by a truck, insinuating that every bone in his body is aching, that his very being is in so much pain that he just needs at least another half hour to get over this agonizing pain, before adding, "But I'm alright, I guess." This gives me those emo vibes of the guy who's like, "I'm so depressed. I just want to die and kill myself and get over it, but I guess I feel fine." He wants you to care, but you really don't. Also, how long does it take people to realize that this question is actually rhetorical and only asked out of introductory politeness? Like, "Good morning, how are you today?" People say there's no correct answer to the majority of social questions, but if you're asking a stranger how their day is going, the right answer should be good or fine. If this person immediately just starts spilling their life out in front of you, it's either that this person is at the breaking point or they have a lot of psychological instability. Either way, that is psychological instability in either scenario. A person shouldn't open up to you unless they know you, like a barber, a bartender, that nail technician at your favorite salon that doesn't keep all the things you tell her to yourself. Or a neighbor. You can tell them how you're really feeling. And if you're feeling suicidal, I can imagine that would help. Not that I know. Other than that, this conversation really doesn't have that much depth. I just think it's interesting how he contradicts his own explanation of his emotional turmoil. It really does sound like a man. Men really don't know how to feel in the majority of cases. What I also love about this scene is that she's completely unbothered by everything that he just said and just responds with, "Glad to hear it," as if he didn't just exaggerate the feeling of being impacted by a large vehicle. She's heartless, and if I know Resident Evil fans, they love heartless characters. No emotional depth, yeah. Afterwards, she asks him if he lives in this town, which, fair enough, but what she says afterwards kind of confuses me. "Can you tell me what happened?" I'm sorry, lady, are you talking about his Jeep being stuck in the fence, or the fact that you most likely dragged him to this cafe? How did she do that, by the way? Just to drag a passed-out man down an alley? You guys saw the length of that alley. Maybe that's why he feels like he got hit by a truck, because she was quite literally dragging him on bare concrete. I assume. I mean, how else did he get at this cafe? I highly doubt those weird things would have carried him here. It's not like this is some sort of fairytopia. The lack of hostility here also makes no sense, because if she dragged him all the way from the alley into this diner— sorry guys, it's a diner, not a cafe— point is, didn't she see those bodies? Didn't she encounter anything? Also, what scared those things off? Because they looked wild. Did she shoot them? And if she did, why are they so uncannily calm? It's nightmare fuel, even if your protagonist isn't even normal. We now find out this man is a tourist. That makes slightly more sense. Then that would mean the mother is dead, because you don't exactly go touring with your daughter if your wife isn't with you. So I keep confusing wife and daughter. I don't know, Cheryl just sounds like such an old name. Unless you're divorced, then I'm sorry for the loss of your marriage. He came to Silent Hill for a vacation. We officially realized this is not the same plot as the movie. I'm just marking talking points while I find out new information as well. So if my dialogue comes off as confusing, it's because it's easier to write a script around every single detail rather than risking losing a very vital piece of information, because I still don't know what went wrong with the Ashley Graham analysis. I have this huge belief I did miss a bunch of vital dialogue that could have explained some parts, so I don't want that to happen again, so bear with me. Because the dissection is part of comparing the game characters' reactions to human reactions, comparing virtual situations to literal situations, so all dialogue in this scene matters, because as we dig further into this game, we can figure out more about the characters and his backstory. Character. which is also the reason we haven't learned his name yet, but I'm sure we'll get to it in a moment. Anyway, continuing this diner scene, he tells her that he just got there and doesn't remember what happened. In other words, this man successfully gaslit himself into believing that everything he thought happened was a dream. That's impressive, not even I can gaslight myself that quickly. Or it might be a concussion. We have to remember he first suffered a car accident with a twisted neck, and now he got jumped by a bunch of mole people and most likely hit his head. He almost died twice in less than 5 minutes. He asked the police officer lady if she's seen his daughter. Now, listen to this description. Black hair, just turned 7 years old, and she's wandering around like a little psycho. Is this Evelyn? Is this Evelyn's backstory? Her dad ditched her in Silent Hill and she ended up getting kidnapped by the Umbrella Corporation? I don't know, I'm gonna keep trying to connect these two loose games that have no connection whatsoever, so bear with me. You are bearing with me, I swear. So the police officer lady says the only person she's encountered throughout this whole town is him. Now, let's assume she was actually smart enough to start knocking on doors, actually exploring the town to make sure there are no residents, instead of just assuming there aren't any residents. As if the game just has to establish that this male protagonist isn't the brightest tool in the shed, he asks this woman, remember, she told him 3 seconds ago that he was the only person she's seen in this town. Where is everybody? They conclude that it's strange the town is empty, but first of all, she says something bizarre is going on. I'm just gonna assume she's talking about the mutilated carcasses in the back alley, because an abandoned town is scary, but not really bizarre. I'm not saying it's common, but bizarre insinuates something unnerving, unusual, or unnatural. Anything under the underline is going on. We, as the audience, know that which the protagonist has experienced is bizarre, but she doesn't know that unless she's withholding something from him, which makes her a bad guy. Or just slightly suspicious. You know how suspicious women are that hide information? Also, isn't it strange that she asked him if he were a resident, but this shell of a man didn't bother asking her any questions, except really hollow questions that were already established? And finally, we get the question we've been asking ourselves from the start of the game. What is his name? And it's Harry. Really? Harry? Harry is the name they settled on? Although Harry's name is not as weird as Sybil's. Sybil. That's her name. Officer Sybil, guys. So she comes from a town next door. Do towns live next to each other like houses? Is that a thing? I mean, yes, a town lives next to some sort of region, but I always assumed there was this huge gap so big you could get lost in the Twilight Zone trying to make it to the next town. I didn't think these towns are seated directly next to each other. Also, Brahms isn't an actual town, you know, the town she mentions he's from, because Google just refers me back to Silent Hill and the boy. After establishing the characters' names and their reason for being here, she says she's going to call for reinforcements. For what? They're acting like nothing happened and then acting like something did happen. I don't understand this scene or this dialogue. For a woman claiming there's danger outside, she's really not doing herself any favors by blatantly handing this stranger, remember kids, just because you know his name and why he's there does not mean he's not a stranger. She hands him the only gun she has. I wish Leon was like this, but no. Here, Grace, take this one bullet and use it wisely. Am I going crazy? Does it make her stupid or considerate? Also, does it make Harry worse the fact that he's willing to take the only weapon this woman has on her? I think she should have pulled a Resident Evil 7 and given him a knife. I mean, why the hell would you, a lone woman, hand a strange man who could be lying to you a gun? But to be fair, so we can establish that her instincts don't entirely suck, he was very adamant on the fact that he was going to find his daughter and that he'd risk his life by going out there into the fog. Again, this village went from being everything is missing to everything is dangerous. Sybil tells Harry that he shouldn't fire the gun unless he has to, and to make sure he's not accidentally going to shoot her by mistake. Now, obviously, I don't want to judge voice acting when it comes to older games, but in general, the female voice actress does actually sound slightly better than the male voice actor, because my personal opinion, coming from someone who has never done voice acting and who doesn't really care about good voice acting, as long as the story's good, what makes voice acting really intimate and kind of sound legit is if you talk as if you are the character, as if this is your situation. Since that's the entire point of art, is to live inside that which you have created for yourself. The female is very passive, kind of expecting a horrible situation, but she sounds prepared and calm. Whereas the male is still deciding what he wants to feel. He's not really in touch with the character's current position. Taking what Harry says next, he says it so sarcastically that it also almost comes off as rude, like, thanks for nothing. This woman literally just gave you her gun, her only weapon of protection, mind you, and for him to respond so sarcastically comes off as Leon's Wolfman grandpa persona. Despite this, moving on, Sybil leaves Harry on his own in this town, which suggests she knows there's a way out of this town. It's kind of odd because what are the police going to do about an empty town? All I think the government is going to do is nuke the place like a Resident Evil wannabe breeding ground. I mean, who knows? Maybe Silent Hill is Raccoon City rediscovered. Can you imagine how cool that would be? Just to have like a game called Raccoon City Rediscovered. I mean, you know how these games like their one-word titles, especially if the one word is really long and kind of needs an explanation, like Requiem or Biohazard or Village, which didn't really need a big explanation, but it was still a really cool word, I guess. Okay, so now Harry has gained the ability of collecting things. My tongue's not trained in English. Chill. Which I point out because isn't it kind of a stupid question to ask? There is a residential area map. Take it? No, I think I'll leave that behind. I'll just wander myself up and down the streets till I find what I'm looking for. I get the game is designed to take in the fact that you have limited storage, which is why it gives you the option of leaving things behind and you don't just randomly collect everything that you happen to click on. But can it tell the difference between necessities and choice items, or is it introducing the mechanic of storage? Since this is also when Harry gets a gun and also when we learn his name, so you know it's getting serious. Before Harry can leave the diner, I thought this was a phone at first till he pointed out that it's a radio. But the sound is like a ringing of phone and static radio decided to synchronize. And it does not sound as great as I'm explaining it to you right now. Also, is it normal for a radio to go off like that? Does it just do that whenever? Also, the lady stated that none of the phones or the radios work, which is weird when this radio starts blaring static for no reason. As if the radio and the enemies are connected, a pterodactyl just breaks through the window and the static suddenly stops. I do also want to add that it's not actually a pterodactyl, and I'm just saying that because it looks like a pterodactyl. That's hella suspicious if you ask me. I also want to add, probably for the 50th time, these angles look so complicated. Not only do you have to start shooting rapidly so that you don't die, but you also have to twist the abdomen to aim at the enemy, because the game doesn't automatically do that for you. Which is a good thing, don't get me wrong. Games are designed to test the player's determination and your reflexes as well as some nerves in your brain. It also helps your brain memorize patterns, so maybe these awkward angles were actually some kind of educational decision. These fixed camera angles we keep getting were actually created for the sake of hiding monsters more easily, but one thing I noticed a difference between Resident Evil's fixed camera angles and Silent Hill's is the fact that Silent Hill's angles aren't fixed in one position, they're constantly moving with the protagonist. Either for cinematic effect or nausea, whichever one it was, I do have to admit the angles are very distracting. Also, Harry, through the interaction with these flying vampires, realizes that this is not a dream, and he should stop trying to gaslight himself. This reminds me of Ethan's optimism. The funny thing about Ethan that I don't think anybody has talked about or really mentioned is the fact that he's always so optimistic. He's very positive. Like, in the beginning of the game, where certain doom is so evident, Ethan's just like, come on, we can make it! I do have to admit, in that sense, that particular one, Harry does remind me of Ethan, where he doesn't want to assume the worst, and that he'd rather die at the hands of these mutations than accept the fact that his daughter is most likely, considering the circumstances, no longer with us. I'm not saying you should have ditched his daughter. What I am saying is this. A mother would have left with a police officer to get more police officers, because mothers tend to be more tactical than suicidal. Men are more suicidal and homicidal than women are. Therefore, men are more likely to be serial killers, but women are more likely to be mentally ill. So that's the difference between Harry and if this protagonist were a female. Because in the original movie for Silent Hill, the mother follows this police officer. I really like the contrast between the male and the female protagonist between the movie and the game, because it does showcase their different psyches, and it matches the stereotypical psychology we normally associate with women and men. Now, back into the game, Harry decides to head back to the back alley where he was jumped, because much like Rambo, he now wants revenge now that he has acquired the gun. Turns out Silent Hill just blatantly displays these boxes of bullets. Bullet boxes? Whatever you call that. They supply ammunition in the form of this tiny red and white box that looks like a packet of cigarettes. Now, back to the focus point. Harry eventually finds a different type of enemy, which appears to be a dog. How peculiarly similar to another game that we've heard of before. I do have to be honest with you, every time Harry runs down this alley, it feels like that scene in every drug cartel action movie where they're having an action-packed sequence of characters running, where they're throwing the camera all over the place, trying to get you to feel the adrenaline. Hey look, more cigarettes! On that note, they're starting to look more like matches than cigarettes. Do bullets come in little boxes like these? So the interesting part about this back alley experience is that Harry finds Cheryl's sketchbook. Why it's there, we will never know. What we do know is this: Cheryl is at the school. According to who? Apparently Harry. How does he know this? Call it father's intuition, as he stares at a piece of paper that says, "To school," like a caveman. I just think it would have been more mentally accurate to just have this, "I don't know where she is, but since this says school, I have a feeling I should go to the school." Would it have been the same amount of retarded? Yes, because I don't think there's any way you could play this scene off in a coherent way that's realistic. In fact, the majority of this game is very unrealistic, but hey, it's a game. You can always use that excuse. But before we get into that, let's talk about this sketchbook. Did you have a sketchbook when you were that young? No, wait, let me rephrase. Did your parents have the childlike understanding to address the fact that you were an artistic spirit, not just a misbehaved child scribbling on the wall for fun? Then follow up with that, did they then decide to get you a sketchbook? I wish I had a sketchbook at that age. Think of all the memories I could have brought with me. But instead they got painted over when we moved because it's not like you can take whole walls with you. I'm jealous of the amount of attention Harry spent on his daughter Cheryl, okay? So apparently this piece of Leonardo da Vinci on the front cover of this sketchbook was drawn by Cheryl herself. And it's apparently a portrait of her father. No way, this guy looks nothing like your dad. He looks better. You should have asked Cheryl to design the animation of this game. But pointing out this more important thing, why does it look like that? This book looks like you found it in a sewer, and I can't even make out the words sitting on top of the book. I also can't tell if they were going for the swirling page turn thing that the majority, if not all sketchbooks probably most likely have, or if this cover used to be white. I think the second one would be more disturbing. Then again, I've never seen a sketchbook with such a unique shade. Doesn't matter. Harry doesn't take the sketchbook with him, though that is an optional thing. I don't blame the gamer playing the game, because that book looks like it's carrying something. That looks like the start of Resident Evil. So Harry comes across blood and paper. On the paper is written doghouse with a French word and the word st, which most likely stands for street, but I'm stuck here thinking it's saint. So he finds a house key on the inside of the doghouse. I love how the house on the inside is the literal definition of uncanny silence, and then as soon as Harry leaves, this blaring static you forgot existed crawls back into your ear. You want to know something interesting that I just thought of? This blaring static noise kind of sounds like the radio. That was the first time Harry got attacked when he actually had a gun. The static noise is kind of like an alert to warn Harry when enemies are nearby. I'm guessing to accompany that horrible sound I was talking about previously to these enemies, which meant that radio was kind of like an introduction of the most ear-piercing enemy music you will ever hear in your life. Or maybe not. Maybe there are worse games out there. I mean, there were a lot of games back in the 90s. I like when this individual walks into the house and the camera angle shifts from the back of Harry's head to the side of his hip. The player stops to take into account which direction the character is supposed to move. Kind of reminds me of Super Bro. Okay, interesting moment. After unlocking the door with the 3 padlocks that sits inside the house, which is the same house that you unlocked using the key from the doghouse, stay with me here, Harry walks out to discover the sky is getting dark again. What does this mean? I don't know. Maybe it matters. Harry finally finds the school after all those side quests, and he gets a map of the school and now has to figure out where he has to go. And again, the game is like, do you want to take this very vital piece of assistance or wander around like a lost child? He finds 3 notes at the receptionist's desk, which is written in blood. I mean, out of curiosity, is that human blood or... So the first paper gives him a time, a place, and a recipe for disaster. This is weird. I feel like the movie was interesting because of the fact that everything that happened around them wasn't really something they could interact with. But I'm pretty sure if you made a game like that, you might as well be the creator of Mixtape. I'm assuming whoever wrote this wrote with a quill, because the words are very small. Again, another time, 12 p.m. or a.m. a.m. is the morning, but because the day starts at exactly 1200 hours, which basically translates to 0 hours, which translates to 1200 hours. So 1200 hours in AM is more likely to be when the day starts. 12 p.m. would be somewhere closer to the afternoon. The start of the afternoon, in other words. But because this particular message doesn't specify AM nor PM, it's most likely counting 24 hours instead of splitting it into 12 hours for each side of the day. And a place with songs and sound, obviously the music room. I think the poem is talking about music notes. This doesn't matter, I'm only expressing my inner confusion. Now for the third letter. Another time, but unfortunately this doesn't specify, which means it automatically doesn't specify PM nor AM, which bothers me. Darkness that brings the choking heat. You mean hell? Are we talking about hell? Look, I know whoever wrote this probably had a horrible time in middle school, but that's a little bit of a morbid way to describe a classroom. Unless I'm wrong, which I most likely am. M? As in AM? We won't know, will we, because this genius didn't specify. Well, at least we can tell he didn't graduate. It also sounds like it's talking about cooking meat. It could be talking about a furnace, but hell, a furnace, what's the difference? I mean, yes, Satan is the difference. Actually, being in a furnace would be better. Who wants to suffer an eternal agony with that loser? What I will say about these games is that it did technically benefit children because it exercises your brain. I mean, it keeps your brain alive, reminding you have a brain. What were we talking about again? Silent Hill. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Okay, Harry enters a bathroom somewhere along the corridors of the school and hears a moaning cry. I say moaning because this girl's throat sounds like it hurts. Mine hurts as well. I feel your pain. I just wanted to add that it's uncomfortable to hear. Much more uncomfortable when you consider there's context behind why a girl could be crying in a locked stall in the girls' bathroom. Another random side mention, which means I don't think it's important, but I do think it was funny, is how Harry unlocks a locker where a cat jumps out. He relaxes as soon as he realizes the loud scratching was just a cat, only for the cat to run off down the hall to get slaughtered by the moles crawling around the school, and you can quite literally hear the cat being torn to shreds, all the while Harry's just staring in the direction of where the cat ran. I also don't really like how when he does get grabbed by one of the mole creatures, they're grabbing his crotch area with its teeth. It also doesn't help that the animation twitching that Harry does looks like he's enjoying it. The sound effects he makes also doesn't help. I don't know, my brain's rotting right now. More importantly are the classrooms. I really think they decorated these classrooms with the intention to make it feel like a classroom. This one classroom has more detail in it than the majority of games bother to give each classroom. Most classrooms, actually. Taking White Day, for example. As much as I love White Day, they didn't really separate one subject from the other in a way that would make it feel like it was a real school. It felt more like an abandoned school. Also, did you guys know that White Day is described as a sequel to Valentine's Day? Japan loves love so much they made a sequel to Valentine's Day, so they wouldn't have to wait at least 365 or 366 days until another Valentine's Day. So it's a closure holiday because Japan is really the world of justice. Women give men chocolate on Valentine's Day, and Japan seems kind of sexist towards men because apparently men have to give women a gift in return, which should be worth 2 to 3 times more. Boy, I'm glad I'm not a man. I got sidetracked again, sorry. Okay, classrooms and perverted moles. Now remember, Harry has 3 puzzles to solve before progression can be made. And to be honest, this game doesn't really have the amount of substance you'd usually require to make a video like this. He collects a chemical for his first puzzle. It's not really a puzzle since the main thing he does is just pour it out on this hand of clay. You know, that is actually a great art project. Just recreate the physical incarnation of an old man's hand. Harry uses this chemical, I kid you not, a chemical that looks like a poison bottle to get rid of this hand. So, no, it's not a science project. What is this chemical, though? No, probably doesn't matter. Probably doesn't matter. You need serious brain wires detached from reality to have this puzzle become your main focus with the expectation that it's going to result in you finding answers. Judging by the remains, I'm assuming it's just clay, because if it was flesh, it would be red. So let that unnecessary piece of information help you sleep at night. I was right about the music room theory, though, but that doesn't make me smart, since the puzzle was kind of obvious about that. Anyway, does this bloody piano seem familiar? Just thought I saw it somewhere before. Maybe Resident Evil, maybe White Day, maybe Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion. Interesting. I'm saying this because I don't actually know where I saw a bloody piano. I just remember it being incredibly misplaced and annoying. I think it's uncomfortable because people always have this assumption that when you see blood, that's bad news. What am I supposed to do if it's that time of the month, okay? This game is so jarring with its choice of where voice acting belongs and where it doesn't. He'll say random things, and sometimes he has a voice, and other times he doesn't. It's strange. One thing that I don't understand, and I probably would have understood better had I connected the map to the beginning of the game, is that Harry claims he's been here before. Then he reminds the audience that this giant triangle was never here before. Oh, silly Harry, don't you know? The Illuminati has always been here, and they call themselves Hollywood. On a more serious note, though, I don't remember this location, not even in the movie. I just remember them running from a fog and a triangle head dude, and that he was ripped. Whew. Anyway, to add context, I barely watched the movie. I was passively sitting down and standing up again. If this place has familiar significance, then sorry, I'm retarded. I lost track of the poems and the puzzles in this game. This is why Super Horror Bro was important, okay? He was always stating the obvious even when it wasn't necessary. Hey, look, a person went flying into a fan. He says, if I get too close, I could be sucked in. My guy, you could not be any closer to that fan unless you kissed it. The basement of this school is so weird as well. It looks like a torture chamber straight out of that Joy Joy Gang scene where the animatronics mold together. I think what makes this scene strange is the fact that this facility he's running around in is underground. Now, he's running on those steel plates you usually build unusually high above ground. In other words, the sound his running is making is the sound of the steel bars not touching ground, which means this basement goes at least another 15 feet down. If this were really 500 years from now, philosophers are going to dig up building after building. If we're not already living underground by then, we might as well be mole people. Hold on a second, is that another wheelchair? How suspiciously curious. I'm starting to believe this might be some sort of medical facility, and it concerns me because they don't look particularly hygienic. They also love the aesthetic of rubbing blood on everything, which is kind of gross. Because you don't know if the blood's human or not, and you don't know if whoever's blood that is has some kind of disease. Because remember, guys, in horror games, STDs still exist. Anyway, who's making all of this? Does Harry even know why he's here anymore? Where is Cheryl? She's not down here. He literally had to unlock 2 super fancy rock locks. He needed rocks for those locks. Why would Cheryl be here? She's not. Why would anyone searching for their child believe their child is here, unless he knows he buried her here? But as for the door, of course, it has no keyhole, no doorknob, not even a proper display, really. So it begs the question, what does it take to be a door? Even Harry asks this question. Why is this a door? Why do we call it a door and not a barricade? If it, oh my bow and arrow, it's a sacrificial door. But no, all it required was a picture slide and no blood. Then why is there so much blood? Did somebody else think it was a sacrificial door, or is it because everything else is covered in blood as well? Suspiciously interesting. After a while of exploring, Harry comes across a corpse dangling from the wall, and if you thought he'd be passive as ever, a hanging body, this is sick. Sick as in cool, or sick as in mentally, because he didn't seem to shed as much shock as he did before. Not a, what's this? But on the bright side, he did find a shotgun. But who left it there? Why is there a shotgun in a place so ceremoniously sacrificial? Alright, you fellow weirdos. If you stayed for this long, you're probably psychotic, or you're my mother, or you're my sibling, and I begged you to do so. Regardless, this is the end of the first chapter of A Forgotten Hill, an amateur's description of Silent Hill. I quite literally just came up with that, and now I like it, so that will be the title. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed it, and I can make a part 2. I'm assuming there are going to either be 2 more or 3 more episodes of this, if I do stay true to analyzing every detail that catches my attention. Anyway, adios, and hopefully we'll see each other next week.